At 6:27 on the morning of the 6th of June, 1944, an LCVP landing craft of the United States Coast Guard, designated Easy Red, dropped its forward ramp into a meter of cold sea water 70 meters from the foot of the bluffs above Omaha Beach. The first man down the ramp was a sergeant from the 16th Infantry of the 1st Division. He fell forward into the water and did not stand up again. The second man down the ramp was a 30-year-old Hungarian-born combat photographer from the New York office of Life magazine. He was carrying 2 Conta II rangefinder cameras around his neck, 4 rolls of black and white film in the inside pockets of his army field jacket, no rifle, no helmet stenciled with a number, and no military authority of any kind beyond a press correspondence accreditation card. His name was Endre Friedman. He had legally changed it in 1935 in a small Paris hotel room to a generic Americanized pseudonym he and his then-girlfriend Gerda Taro had invented because they had decided that no Jewish refugee photographer would ever be paid as much as an imaginary rich American. He had become, by the morning he stepped off Easy Red into the surf at Omaha Beach, the best-known combat photographer in the world. His name was Robert Capa. He took, on Omaha Beach, the most famous photographs of the most important amphibious assault in human history. He took them under fire, holding a small German-made camera at chest height, with his hands shaking so badly that most of the images were out of focus. The accident of the focus, in his case, made the pictures more honest than the pictures of the same beach taken by less terrified men. They are the closest thing the world has to a window into the first hour of the Normandy landings as it was lived. This is the story of how he got them. He was born in Budapest in 1913, the middle son of a tailor and a dressmaker. He left Hungary at the age of 17 in 1931, after a brief arrest for participation in a left-wing student demonstration. He spent 2 years in Berlin, learning the photographic trade, and fled the rise of National Socialism in 1933 for Paris. In Paris he was poor. He was 20. He could not, in 1933, sell a photograph to a French picture editor for the asking price of a Hungarian refugee. He met, in 1934, a young German Jewish refugee his own age named Gerda Poherl. She was as broke as he was. They invented, between them, the fiction that he was a successful American photographer named Robert Capa visiting Paris on assignment, and that she was the European agent for his exclusive Paris print rights. They sold his existing portfolio under the new name for 3 times the price they had been getting under his old one. The fiction worked. Capa, within 6 months, was the working name. Gerda, by 1936, had also taken a new working name. She called herself Gerda Taro. They went to Spain in the summer of 1936 to photograph the Spanish Civil War. It was the war that taught Capa the trade. He developed there the working method that defined the rest of his career: close, handheld, no telephoto, no tripod, get inside the moment, accept the blur, accept the risk, take the picture only the photographer in the line of fire could take. Taro was killed in Spain in 1937, crushed by a Republican tank in the chaotic retreat from Brunit. She was 26. Capa returned to Paris carrying her cameras. He never married. By 1940 he had photographed for Life magazine the German invasion of Poland, the French collapse, the British retreat from Dunkirk, and the early air war over the English Channel. He had developed a personal style that the magnum photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson later summarized in a single sentence. He said, "Capa took photographs the way other photographers tried to." The compliment was professional. It meant that Capa was willing to walk closer to the explosion, hold the camera lower, shoot blind, and trust the negative. In his own words, in the only English-language summary he ever gave of his working method, he said, "If your pictures aren't good enough, you aren't close enough." He had photographed, by 1943, the American landings in North Africa and the American landings at Sicily. He had been shot at. He had been wounded once, lightly, by shell fragment shrapnel in Tunisia. He had drunk enormous quantities of cognac with George S. Patton and with Ernest Hemingway. He was, by the spring of 1944, the most senior accredited Life correspondent in the European theater. In May of 1944, Life's London bureau chief told him that the assignment of the year was about to come up. He did not say what it was. Capa understood. He requested, in writing, to be embedded with the first wave of the assault. He requested, specifically, to land with the 16th Infantry Regiment of the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, which had been confirmed to him by an Army Public Affairs colonel as the first American unit scheduled to hit a Normandy beach on the morning of the invasion. The request was approved. He boarded the troopship USS Samuel Chase at Weymouth on the evening of the 3rd of June. The ship sailed in the early hours of the 5th. He spent the crossing in the wardroom playing a slow, continuous poker game with a series of infantry officers from the 16th Regiment, several of whom would be dead by lunchtime on the 6th of June. He did not sleep on the night of the 5th. He cleaned his cameras. He loaded fresh film. He drank a series of small cups of black coffee. He wrote a brief and uncharacteristically tender letter to his mother, who was then living in New York. At 4:30 on the morning of the 6th, he was called to the boarding deck. He climbed down a net into LCVP Easy Red with 31 other men. The landing craft slipped its harness from the parent ship and began the long lurching run to the beach. The channel was rough. He was sick. He was, by the time the ramp dropped, very cold, very tired, and frightened to the edge of his nerve. He had nothing to do, no rifle to load, no orders to give, no orientation to lead, except hold his cameras out of the spray, keep his hands warm enough to operate the focus rings, and wait for the ramp to drop. It dropped at 6:27. The first man fell. Capo went down the ramp into the surf and ran for the foot of the beach, holding the cameras at chest height. The 16th Infantry's first wave on Easy Red took catastrophic casualties. The pre-landing bombardment had landed long, behind the German strongpoints rather than on them. The German machine gun positions on the bluffs above the beach, entrenched in pillboxes and trench lines that had been under construction for 3 years, opened fire as the ramps dropped. The American infantry, wading through chest-deep water and across 200 meters of open beach to the seawall, were cut down in long sweeping arcs of MG-42 fire. Capa, with no weapon and no military function, ran for the only available cover, the line of half-submerged steel anti-tank obstacles known as Czech hedgehogs, set in rows at the high-tide line. He crouched behind one of them. He shot, in the first 10 minutes, his first roll of film. He could not stand up to focus. He held the camera at chest height, sighted approximately by the position of his elbows, set the focus by guess, set the aperture by the dimness of the morning light, and pressed the shutter when he saw movement. He shot one wounded soldier crawling through the surf. He shot a second wounded soldier on the seawall. He shot a tracked tank destroyer burning at the waterline. He shot the silhouette of an American sergeant ducking behind a hedgehog. He shot the long line of men still wading in from the water. He kept the film canisters dry by holding them, between exposures, inside the inside pocket of his field jacket, against his ribs. He spent 90 minutes on the beach. In the last half hour, the German fire began, by inches, to slacken. The second wave was landing. American infantry were beginning to take the bluffs. The beachhead was beginning, narrowly, to hold. At 8 on the morning of the 6th of June, Capa walked back into the surf, climbed into an empty returning LCVP, and was taken out to the offshore destroyer USS Anson for the return crossing to England. He had 4 exposed rolls of film inside his field jacket. He had taken, by the working count, 106 photographs of the first 90 minutes of the American assault on Omaha Beach. He was the only photographer who had landed with the first wave on Easy Red. The pictures he had taken were the only photographs of that morning that any newspaper or magazine in the world would ever have. He delivered the rolls to the Life office in London on the evening of the 7th of June. The London picture editor, a young American named John G. Morris, sent them down to the darkroom for emergency development. The deadline for the next issue of Life magazine was 60 hours away. The films had to be developed, dried, contact printed, captioned, edited, scanned, transmitted by undersea cable to New York, and engraved before press time on the 9th of June. The darkroom technician, a 15-year-old British apprentice named Dennis Banks, was working a 16-hour shift under enormous pressure. He set the negatives into the wash bath in their stainless steel rack. He hung them in the heated drying cabinet. He came back to check on them after 20 minutes. The drying cabinet door had jammed. The internal temperature had risen by perhaps 50 degrees centigrade. The emulsion on 3 of the 4 rolls had melted off the celluloid base. Of the 106 photographs Capa had taken on Omaha Beach that morning, only 11 survived. 11 negatives. 11 photographs of the first hour of the American assault. They are, to this day, the 11 photographs the world has of the first hour of D-Day. They are blurred. They are tilted. They are smudged with the salt water that had run off the films before development. The largest single subject, an American sergeant in the surf, hand on a hedgehog, head turned away from the camera, has now been identified by name. His name was Edward Reagan. He survived the war. The blur, the tilt, the smudge, the accidents of the focus and the accidents of the development made the photographs, by the journalistic standards of the time, technically poor. Life ran them on the 11th of June on a 6-page spread under the apologetic caption. The pictures on these pages are slightly out of focus, but they are the only ones we have of the first wave. The phrase became Capa's. He used it 3 years later as the title of his autobiography. Capa survived the war. He photographed the liberation of Paris, the Battle of the Bulge, the crossing of the Rhine, and the surrender at Reims. He helped to found Magnum Photos in 1947. He photographed the founding of the State of Israel in 1948. He went to Vietnam under contract to Life Again in 1954 to cover the French collapse at the close of the First Indochina War. He stepped on an anti-personnel mine, on a path through a rice paddy, in Tai Binh province on the 25th of May, 1954. He was 40 years old. He was killed instantly. He was still holding his camera when his Vietnamese guide reached him. The 11 Omaha Beach photographs sit today in the archive of the International Center of Photography in New York, which his brother Cornell helped to found in his memory. The faded prints, in their conservation folders, are among the most requested items in the collection. They are the closest the world will ever come to standing in the surf at 6:27 on the morning of the 6th of June, 1944, while the first wave of the 16th Infantry came down the ramp and the German guns above the beach began to fire. A Hungarian refugee tailor's son took them, with a small German camera held against his chest, with his hands shaking too hard to focus, in the 90 minutes he was on the sand. If the story stayed with you, there are more like it on the Untold front. The small people in unmilitary jobs who carried back the images and the words that have outlasted every official report of the war. Subscribe and we'll see you at the next one.